Today is our last lecture, and in this lecture we will just have a quick review of what we discussed in our this course. We started this course with the first chapter, basics of ethics, from the other book, Ethics in IT, that is written by Reynolds. So in that chapter we have the discussion that why ethics are important, why we need professional practices, ethical practices in the business. So we discussed the different reasons that why organizations should practice in this way. So obviously every business company, every organization want to get the goodwill of the company, and that goodwill is not possible if we are involved in some kind of unethical activity, or we are actually having unethical practices to gain more business. So if we want to create the goodwill of the company, we have to adopt the ethical practices within the organization when we are dealing with others. Quite possible the other business organizations or the individuals. Again, if we practice in a way that should be, then it means we perform consistently. If we are good in business practices, we are good in our profession, and we are consistently performing well, then obviously we are not going to lose our the share of the market, and the people trust us, and we actually grow consistently. And definitely if we want to grow in the business community, and we want to grow our business in general, then we have to follow the good practices. People want others to follow and adopt the good practices. If I am good, I want to see others good as well. So this is the win-win situation. So if we need the sustainability, and we want to continue, we have to adopt the good practices. And then there is a lot of legalization, and there are a lot of legal protection for the consumers, for the end users, and the government agencies also try to ensure that whatever is done, that should be in a legal way. So if we are adopting the professional practices, we are following the ethical rules, and then we actually protect our company, our business, and our employees from some legal actions. We discussed the different case studies when some company who has origin, who has headquarters in the US, but he has unfair means or unprofessional, unethical practices to get the business in some other parts of the world. They are actually sued, they are charged in the US for the unethical practices. And if we are following the unethical practices, obviously it's actually just is against the goodwill of the company, that if we are doing something bad, obviously we have unfavorable publicity, and no company, no organization, no individual wants the bad publicity. So if we want to avoid it, if we want to avoid the unfavorable kind of publicity, we have to follow the ethical practices. How to achieve the good ethical practices within the organization? For that, we actually need some ethical officer within the organization. We need some, the solid planning, solid program to implement the ethical practices, the professional practices within the organization. So the corporate ethical officer or ethics officer is responsible to actually come up with a plan, to actually ensure that they have some sort of formal documentation, and the guidelines that are helpful for the employees of the organization. And then obviously the attitude of the top management is very important. If the top management is serious, if the top management is committed towards the professional practices, they don't want the illegal or the business that is through some unfair means. So the lower level staff or the real workforce is also actually abiding the laws and regulations, and they are very careful when they are actually looking for the business. We also discussed the decision-making process, that how to make decisions. If we, I mean, first of all, we have to identify the problem. If once the problem is identified, then we need to think about the solutions. We need to look for the alternatives. And we try to select the best alternative of the problem, best alternative solution. And then we implement it. Once it is implemented, then we actually observe, we analyze the results, and if there is there is need to revisit the problem, then again we do this cycle. So decision making is very important. Why we are discussing here the decision making process? Because when we are doing the business with other companies, with other individuals and groups, so there are different situations and the scenarios where we have to decide either this kind of activity is okay, this kind of activity is professional for us and is okay for the company, we have to withdraw. So we need to have the guidance to make the better decision for the business. We need to follow the ethical practices. And again, we need to actually, whatever is the decision, we cannot and we shouldn't ignore the ethical considerations. First we need to consider the ethical considerations, and then actually the business or the growth of the business. From our textbook, Chapter 1 is Catalyst for Change, and in this chapter we have the discussion that how the technology changes our way of doing things. We have one way to do the work. We have the requirements to have some new technology to fulfill and to meet those requirements. There is advancement in technology. Once we have the technology, our way of doing things is changed. So this is a kind of continuous process. So now we have a lot of advancement in technology, and this technology actually changes the way how we operate the business. There is global competition, so we need the business, we need the ethical practices for our business. So as long as we are following the ethical practices, then it's okay to actually get more and more business, to grow the business, and there is no problem. But if in this global competition we feel that we cannot compete in a professional way, and if we adopt some kind of unethical manners, then obviously it is not good. So the acceleration of technology is actually one way, the one reasons that why we need, now we have the globalization. We are not confined to some physical space. Now the market is open, that is global. So we have to have some professional practices to meet that challenges of the global market. Chapter 2 was about different ethical theories. We discussed the different ethical theories like Kantianism, that is like every person is equally valuable. We shouldn't use people for our objectives, our goals. We shouldn't use them as a means to achieve our goal. We should consider others as the end, not as the means for our objective. So this is like the concept that is described in the Kantianism. So if I am using some other person's for my personal gain, so it is not actually ethical practice. Utilitarianism is like we need to see the larger utility, or the larger benefits, or the more benefits. We in other words, we may compare the benefits and the harms, and if the benefits are high, so we can actually adopt that practice, we can go for that. But if the harms or the disadvantages are more, then we need to stop it. So that is the kind of concept in utilitarianism. Another theory that we discussed was social contract theory, and in this theory we say that we all are society, so we need to think mutually. We should work for the mutual benefits, and we should do things in a way that is beneficial for the whole society. So we discuss the basic rights of life, liberty and property, and these are the least rights that every individual have, and we should protect it, and we should think in a way that our decisions are mutually beneficial for the society. Then we discussed virtue ethics, and everyone has a inside system that decides that this is good, it's bad. So virtue is something that is very valuable for us, and when we are taking decisions, it should be based on the virtues, whatever we feel good. That is really not, it's not about the subjective opinion. Everyone knows that lying is not something good. And similarly, like honesty is the best policy, that we know that to be honest is something good. So our decisions should be made based on the virtues. Okay, then we have the discussion about the duties and the rights. That what are our responsibilities and what are our rights. In journal we have we are very well aware about the rights. We say this is our right, this is our right, but when we talk about the responsibilities in journal, we actually ignore the responsibilities. So we need to consider the duties as well as our rights. And then what are the consequences if we are ignoring the duties? If everyone is asking for the rights and no one is actually fulfilling the rights of others, then what kind of this society will be? So ultimately we need to decide that what kind of person do I want to be and what kind of world do I want to live in. So if we are fulfilling our responsibilities, then it's okay. If we are fulfilling the duties, it means we are fulfilling the rights of others. Chapter 3 was about networking. We actually discussed the advancement of technology, that how the technology is actually contributing in our daily living. Spam is the methods, the way actually to get the unintended emails. In other words, we call junk mails or junk emails. So when someone is actually for commercial purpose or for some other objective sending messages to a lot of other people who are unintended recipients, then it is actually the one possibility that this technology or the means of communications are actually disturbing your personal life. Internet interactions is quite common now. We have different kind of social media, and we can share a lot of information like videos, audios, or images, and it is really possible to have connections around the globe. So it is, it is another actually possibility of communication. Text messaging, again, like spam emails, although text messaging is something good service, and it is beneficial when you cannot actually talk, and you can just see the text messages, and that is beneficial in some situations, like you are in the meeting and you can just read the message. But at the same time, if you are getting the unintended text messages on your phone, so it is not something really appreciable. And in different countries, like in Pakistan, we also have this kind of regulation by PTA that we can report such numbers where we are getting the unwanted messages, and that number, that can be blocked. Censorship is associated with the mass communication. If we have TV channels, if we have social media, but at the same time the governments or the federal or the provincial public institutes, they have right to what kind of information should be disseminated, and at different times they have different priorities. Again, there is a debate about freedom of expression and right to information access. But at the same time, at different places, the governments or the state agencies have their own policies, and so they actually do this kind of censorship for some certain content. Like in some cases it is good, in some other cases maybe it's against the rights of the people. Freedom of expression, this is again considered as a basic right of the people. We discussed like in most of the countries, people have somehow the freedom of expression, but we cannot say that 100% is a kind of the liberty to every individual. In different countries they have strict rules and regulations, but in some other countries they are more open and free. But again, freedom of expression shouldn't be in a way that is threat to the national security, that is something that is kind of hatred speech against any specific group of people or religion or the region. And that is, again, there are some limits of freedom of expressions. Another important topic of discussion when we have this internet access to everyone, that there shouldn't be access to the inappropriate content, particularly for the underage groups like children less than 18 years. So there should be some mechanism that the access to that kind of content should be restricted. If we are communicating with each other and we have the possibilities with the possibilities of interaction, and we are sharing the personal stuff, and so at the same time we have the privacy issues, there is possibility to compromise on your personal stuff. So it shouldn't be the case. So we should have the mechanism. We should aware the people, the general public, how to actually have better content control, the personal content. We also have the discussion that although the social media and the possibilities of communications are good for general public, but sometimes people are addicted for such kind of activities, and that is not something good. So we discussed a few case studies in which actually this addiction, the internet addiction, led to the death of the users. So we should have the precautionary measures, and we should limit our activities that are related to the social media and the games that are available on the networks and whatever is the stuff. So we should have the restrictions. I mean, sometimes it's self-imposed restrictions, and sometimes it is like the responsibility of some larger group. Like at the bigger level, it's the government responsibility to have such kind of mechanisms in which they can actually stop the misuse of or abuse of such technologies. Then in chapter number 9, we discussed the professional ethics. We discussed that how the professional practices evolve, how the professions evolved. In the old times, there was no, the formal education of any profession, and people do by their own interest. But gradually, we introduced formal education and training for the different professions. And now we have different kind of certifications and the degree programs. Particularly in our context, we have the different programs that offers specialization in IT. In last 40-50 years time, the profession of software engineers or software engineering discipline in general was very much flourished. So we have different degree programs in computer science and software engineering, and we have different professional bodies that are responsible for the standards development, the curriculum development. So they also are ACM and IEEE. They are like prominent organizations for this profession, and software engineers have the formal code of ethics and code of profession, and we discuss in detail that there are actually 8 different key principles, like we have to take care of our customers, our end users, we need to consider our employers, we need to consider our own professional development, we need to be honest, we should actually respect the other's privacy. If we have access to the personal information of our consumers and users, so we need to respect their privacy. So these are actually the key points that this code of ethics provides the guidelines that how to behave a good professional software engineer. Then we actually discuss the different case studies, the different scenarios, in what kind of scenarios, what kind of practice should be. And we saw different, we discussed different case studies. And finally, in this chapter, we discussed whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is like when we see some activity, we observe some activity that is not the appropriate activity, maybe some kind of illegal or unethical, something wrong is happening in our surrounding, in our organization. So being a good professional, it is our responsibility to blow the whistle. But again, this when you are the whistleblowers, you have to consider some careful measures that how to actually do it. And then we also have to consider I mean, we need to consider the motives of the whistleblowers. Sometimes people, for their personal gains, they do such kind of activity. And obviously, when you are doing this, so there are some consequences. So you need to be careful that what are your preferences, how you actually see it, and do it with precautions. Then we discussed intellectual property in chapter number 4. And what is intellectual property? Something that has commercial value, and it is not just the idea. Idea is not something that is called intellectual property. When you present your idea in some form, in some means, in some physical presentation, then it is actually the intellectual property. And the intellectual property rights are actually the ways to actually give you the commercial advantage and to protect your whatever your property is. So I mean, there are different forms of intellectual property. Like it can be the painting, it can be your piece of writing, it can be software. So there are different possibilities. We discussed the different possible intellectual property rights. One is like copyrights. We discussed in details, like if we write the book, so we apply for the copyright. So what is the timeline for the copyrights of some specific product, and as the owner of that product, what are our the rights, and that is protected by the state. And similarly, like we discussed the trade secrets, the secret information, the information that gives you the advantage over your competitors. And trade secret is not really protected by the law. That is the secret until you keep it. Once it is like shared by someone by some means, then it is not actually the trade secret. We also discussed the trademarks. Trademarks are like the logo or the symbols that are used for the identification of the product, and they also have some limitations that how we use it. And we also discussed the fair use of intellectual property. Fair use is like when we are using that specific product for educational purposes or non-commercial purposes. Again, in some cases we have, in some cases we need to ask for the permission, and in some other cases we don't need to ask. We don't need to ask for permissions, but we can use it. Again, there are different possibilities. There are different new rules and regulations on this fair use policy. We also discussed the different possibilities that how the IP are compromised. Like we have networking opportunities, we have easy access to the internet. So there are different platforms where we can share such material, and there are different different sites where such kind of material that is copyrighted material or that has the right IP rights, that can be illegally or unauthorized access can be done. Now, if we say that the software is also intellectual property, so it is really tricky, because software is not something tangible, it's intangible. So it is actually hard to define it as or apply for the IPs of the software. But yes, software is also, is the intellectual property. You can get rights for that software, and we have different case studies that where some company A is against company B in the court, that okay, they used their software, their algorithm, and then the courts I mean, there are different decisions in some different, in the favor of different companies. So it means like we can treat software as our intellectual property, and we can apply for the IP rights for our software. But at the same time, there is a movement that is called open source software. Open source software is, is like when you have the exe file, the executable software along with the source code, then it is called open source software. In that case, you are free to modify, but you need to acknowledge, and it is in contrast with the proprietary software. In proprietary software, you don't have access to the source code, so you cannot modify the proprietary software. But in that case, open source, you can actually contribute, and you can actually improve, and you can actually modify the software. There is another discussion that either this intellectual property rights should be in place, or it's not something really important. So in West, they have a strong mechanism to protect the IPs, but in developing countries or the less developed countries, there is a loose kind of mechanism. So there is a debate that either we need intellectual property rights to prosper, or first we need to have free access to such kind of resources, and once we are developed, then we can actually implement and we can enforce such kind of rights. And finally, we discussed the Creative Commons. That is again related to the distribution of the software, the distribution of the material, how we can use material in a way that is without the violation of intellectual property rights. In chapter 5, we discussed information privacy. Information privacy is like, privacy in general is the area of, you may say, the inaccessibility, personal inaccessibility. You have the right to be isolated. You have your personal life. So that is, I mean, that is important. That is good for your personality. But obviously, if we have a lot of privacy, there are some issues that are related to privacy. There are some social problems associated with this privacy issue. So we discussed that in which, I mean, scenarios we need to disclose information. Sometimes we voluntarily share the information, sometimes involuntarily share the information, like we provide our contact number to some organization, to some business company, and we have no intention that this number will be shared with some other company. But if that organization is sharing that number without our consent, again it's a violation of the data privacy. But it happens for different reasons. And then we discussed that now a lot of information is online, a lot of databases are there, so people or the companies or the state agencies have the access to that data, and they can infer very useful information. They can see the different patterns, and based on those patterns they can actually predict different kind of behaviors, and they can make the very useful predictions. And then we discussed like when the organizations actually compromise on the data privacy of their users, their consumers, and if the public comes to know, then there are certain reaction by the public. So we discussed like Nokia provided the tools instrument for spying their public in Iran. So when actually Iranian people came to know, they boycott the Nokia products, and it was like the backlash. In chapter number 8, we discuss computer reliability. We discussed that software data entry is in fact not the error-free entry. Sometimes we have data entry problems, data entry issues. We enter the incorrect information, and sometimes due to malfunctioning of the software of the program or the incorrect implementation of the program, we retrieve the data that is incorrect. So we actually cannot 100% rely on the data that is produced by the software. So there are different examples, very common examples of software and billing errors. Software and billing errors are in fact not really very serious issues. We discussed different case studies, different major software failures, like one was the Therac 25, that was the X-ray machine. Therac 25 was the machine that was used in the different health units in hospitals, and due to overdosage of rays, there were few, casualties. Few of people actually handicapped for the lifetime, and later on it was discovered that it was not actually the human error, it was actually the design fault, and due to software error, those few patients actually got died. Then we discussed that we can use different software programs, simulators, to actually predict and do the simulation. Sometimes in real life it is not possible to do the real experimentation, so the software programs or the simulators provide the opportunity to do the simulation through the computer programs. We can see on the screen that what will happen, what will be the impact, what are the results. So that is something that is helpful, and it is good to actually save the resources. And then we discussed that because of these problems that are associated with the software products, we need more rigorous practices. We need a more disciplined approach towards the software development, and that's why we have software engineering as a discipline, as a profession, where we try to come up with new formal approaches for the design and development of software. And finally, we discuss software warranties. If we get the product from market that is a tangible product, in that case, that manufacturer or the producer is responsible for even for the replacement of the product. But most of the time when we install some software, we get some software, it is like the statement is that there is no responsibility on the producer side, on the manufacturer side, and it shows like they are also not actually they don't want to actually take any risk that is on the end user's end. So we need more rigorous practices, we need more reliable software. So if we compare the software warranty with the other product warranty, there is no liability. So you often see the statement or the policy or the disclaimer in the beginning when you are actually getting the software or installing the software. In chapter number 7, we discussed the different possibilities of security issues of networks. We discussed that networking is quite common. Now we have a lot of different tools and technologies. We are always connected most of the time. I'm talking in general, like we have mobile data, we have Wi-Fi at home, at offices. So virtually we are all the time connected. So the technologies are not 100% reliable, that we discussed in the previous chapter, that software reliability is still a major issue when we are talking about the software development. So there are loopholes. So those loopholes are actually opportunities for the hackers, for the people who have the bad intentions. They get the access to the systems, to the data, and there are different possibilities. So we discussed like what are the motives of hackers. We also discussed what is ethical hacking. We discussed different type of malwares like viruses, worms, Trojan horses, and so on. So cybercrime is the crime that involves the use of technology, use of internet, use of IT, and now we have already experienced, and we also discussed like how the different interest groups or the countries against each other use this the IT infrastructure for the cyber attacks, and we also discussed the process of online voting, that what are the possible advantages of online voting and what are the drawbacks, major drawbacks, like if we are vulnerable, we are open to the hackers, we have the loopholes in our security, then obviously there will be question mark on the authenticity of the online voting. We discussed the impact of technology on our workplace, on our living standard. We discussed the concept of automation, that how it is increasing the productivity, how it is impacting, how it has effect on the workforce of the organizations. Now there are less people in the organization, but they have more products, and they increase their productivity. So we discussed the different possibilities of doing work. Like traditionally we have to present in the office, but now we can work from home, or there are different other means, like we can remotely work. So the structure of the organization has already changed due to automation and due to the availability of technology, particularly the communication technology. Then we discussed the concept of globalization, like now we are living in the global village, so competition is open and market is open. So there are some, definitely there are some advantages of globalization, but at the same time there are some other concerns or disadvantages related to the globalization. We discussed the topic of digital divide, that how the advancement of technology is actually contributing, or how this advancement of technology is dividing the people. Those who are developed, those who are wealthy, they have more access to the technology and products as compared to those who are living in the less developed areas, who are living in the other part of the world. And we also discussed the concept of winner-take-all society. If the competition is open, if it is kind of a global village, then the rewards and privileges for the top performers are quite high. But those who are not the top performers, but still they are in the competition, they are in the race, so they get very little. We actually discussed like the normal workers have less salaries, and the top management of the organizations have higher salaries, very high salaries. In chapter number 6, we discussed the the issue of privacy and the possible attempts that were made by the government of US, we discussed the different acts, like what are the legislation done by US government to restrict the information collection, and then if the information is collected, how it is used, I mean how it is used by the government or other, the public agencies, and sometimes government do the surveillance or the monitoring or the collect the information without informing their public, and sometimes they actually inform, but when they don't inform, the very common type of this kind of activity is wiretapping, where they actually intercept the calls of different individuals to actually identify something suspicious, or they have some, they have some targets. After 9/11 attack, they have US Patriot Act, and that act has more provisions for such activities. We also discussed the regulation that was passed by US government for the public and private databases, because there are different databases maintained by the public institutes. At the same time, there are some private databases, some business organizations, some financial institutes. They have information like the credit organizations who have information about the credit, details of the individuals. So how to use that data. Then we discussed like different possibilities of data minings when we have such databases. We have the techniques, and we have the technology in the way that that can be utilized to actually find the very relevant and useful information about the individuals, about the organizations, and the government is doing it. Then we discussed the idea of unique identification for every citizen, and again there are some possible advantages of having unique identification, but at the same time there are the people who oppose this idea, and they say that it is not actually guaranteed by having unique ID we can reduce the crime. There will still chances of leakage of information and illegal activities, and we discussed the problem with the social security number in the US context, and then to replace social security number with the national identification number. And we also discussed the Real ID Act, through which actually they agreed to have a new driving license with more relevant information, and have the same kind of purpose that can be achieved by the national ID card. And finally, we discussed the information dissemination, that what kind of distribution is okay, and what kind of dissemination is actually compromise on the privacy of individuals, and if it is like without the consent of the individuals, then it is invasion, and sometimes government do the invasion, and sometimes some other agencies, organizations, or individuals do such kind of activities. So that's all for this course. Good luck.